today?
I'm doing well. I'm in a vehicle somewhere in the United States of America. I'm looking at a cornfield of some kind, and it's raining. But I'm so pleased to be here, and I have a few stories to share with you. But I'd love to know how you're doing first.
Oh my goodness. Well, first of all, I just want to hold space that I love the fact that we are like proving that like we can make time for things, even when we have no time, given that you have this entire rig set up on the side of the road. You sound amazing. You look amazing. And I just like, I love that throughout all of these episodes, none of this is convenient. None of this makes sense, but it just is this like living example that I hope other people feel encouraged and even emboldened to make time for the things that matter, even if it's messy. So I'm fine, Peter. Thank you for asking.
I'm happy to hear it.
Thank you.
So can I tell you a little story?
I want these
about
stories. I want these stories. Yes.
I don't want to overhype the story, but yes, I did visualize this mobile. I was like, how do I get a really high quality live stream from my car? So I visualized this, and this is the inaugural voyage of my car-based streaming rig. So couldn't be happier to be having the inaugural voyage with you, Robyne.
Thank you.
But I'm on my way. I'm doing like more of a facilitation and a keynote for Johnson & Johnson in New Jersey tomorrow. Nice. And so I'm on my way there right now. And I was crossing the border, and I've got all my work visas and all the things, so I wasn't worried about that. I do have a car full of gear. But the border person asked me if I had recently come into any contact with radioactive materials or had any procedures with radioactive materials. I was like, no. And anyways, so he's like, well, you set our alarms off. So I was detained.
Oh my God.
And they had to scan me with a, I don't know, is it a Geiger counter or however you assess radioactive material? So I was detained for a little while at the U.S. border, and they determined that I was not a radioactive threat, and I was released. So that's a first for me. I was like, you're kind of nervous about having all this gear. I knew that I was legit, but that was my excitement for the day that I was excited to share with you.
Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness, Peter. I'm sorry that happened to you, but I'm also like so curious. Like I'm just so curious as to like what triggered and how did that happen? And were they actually just more curious to put you in a stressful situation and see what you would do? Like, I just always think that there's these massive backstories that go behind things. And
right.
If I can like share a very brief border, because I actually, knowing how you got to where you went, I have crossed that border many times. And I can share with you this one time I was traveling to a soccer tournament with Hunter and a couple of his like players. And I was nervous because I had other people's children, right? So like for me, crossing the border by myself, no big deal. With children, there's always that extra little level. But then when you have like other people's children in your care. Anyway, so the border patrol person, and God bless these people, right? So he says to me, he says, do you have any fruit in your car? And we were on our way to a soccer tournament, and I was like, I have fruit, but and I was trying to remember like how, for whatever reason, in a stress moment, you like lose your words. I was trying to explain to them that they were clementines, but I forgot what the word clementine was. So I said, they're like the cousins of oranges and they're little, but they still have their shields on. And the best thing was he looked at me like, sorry, what? And like Hunter and his teammates are like, Robyne, what are you even talking about? We don't have any like random things with shields on them back here. And I'm like, those little oranges. And then they're like, ma'am, pull over. And we had to get out. The kids had to get out. They like literally tore my car to pieces. Like they were even looking in the boards of the vehicle, all because in my moment of panic, I said that they were a relation of oranges that have shields on them to try to tell them they were contained fruit. So the stress that you manage radioactive conversations when I couldn't even stick handle in that moment. Fruit, Peter, is just another reason why you are a remarkable person.
Well, Robin, we all have different shields on in our lives, and even the Clementines of the world, they need some love and care, and that is a very, very funny story. I remember I was crossing not that long ago again into the U.S., and we also got asked the fruit question, and we said, yeah, we have some apples. Is that okay? He's like, yeah, it's okay. Like, it wasn't a problem. But he said that often people are like shoving bananas and oranges down their throat as they roll up to the window. And the guy's like, you can bring those things in. There's just like a quantity, but anyways.
So good.
Thankfully, you were not imprisoned. I was not radioactive. Although, if you know of anybody that needs some plutonium in upstate New York, I know a guy. So, just saying. Just saying.
So good.
Yeah. Well, I feel like it was all divinely timed, because I in my super nerdiness in preparation for this with you, I had like Google mapped like where the best 5G locations were, because we're tethering off my phone right now. And so I had found I'm in Morris, I think New York is the name of the place that I'm in. And I didn't know where I was going to stop, and I was running late because of my detainment. But I like just turned left. I met this dead end, and it's like, it feels like I'm in the perfect spot. And I wouldn't be here had I not been detained. So there's one house over there that has their light on. I'm slightly concerned that they saw me plugging wires in, and they think something like some kind of nuclear deal is going on over here. But other than that, I feel like it's all perfect.
That's amazing, Peter. And again, I love that idea about like, sometimes I feel like when we try to like force things and we like kind of set ourselves with like, we plan and we time and everything has to be like executed for it to go off flawlessly. We're actually setting ourselves up for failure and disappointment and even just additional stress. And one of the things that we often actually talk about in psychology is the fact that like, if you're like planning your life where it's like your deadlines and like your room for error or interruption is so tight, the reality is you're putting undue stress on your body and you're pushing yourself into this place of urgency. And I can share with you, I was just talking recently to a group and we talked about this idea that like, if getting like stuck in traffic or like getting stopped at a red light or having that delay at the border or, having maybe a child who's sick or having to like go pick something up unexpectedly, if that one event pushes you over this threshold where now you're not coping, I feel like that's this gentle invitation that let's use our time wisely. And I encourage people often to think about time and like how much you put into your day in like 80% capacity. So that way you always have this buffer room of like 20% that if somebody needs something, somebody forgot something, you have to do something that wasn't scheduled or planned, your entire day doesn't go to hell in a handbasket.
Well, I tend to give confessionals in my conversation with you, and I would say that I got it right today. I left with enough time. I had mapped out various good 5G locations. There was actually a further 5G location that I was hoping to get to that obviously I wasn't able to get to, but I had given myself some options. So, but I often find myself in the 100 or 110% capacity. I remember not that long ago, I was so busy in between things that I wanted to pour some Brita water, which meant opening the fridge, pouring out the Brita, and then you have to refill it, right? Because you don't want the filter to dry. But I was like, I don't have time to pour myself that glass of water. So I just opened the tap and I was like, I don't even have time to pour myself a glass of water. Yeah. Perhaps like you just said, it was one of those moments where I was like, I think I need to make some changes. And I actually did. I had a conversation with Trevor, who works with me and books my meetings and stuff. And I said, hey, we need to put gaps, lunch, like morning exercise. We need to put those in my calendar, just like we put meeting with CEO in my calendar. And these things need to live there. And I feel like part of it is actually when we just started doing that over the last month or so. When you put those in your calendar, then you see what you actually have time for.
Yeah.
And you really understand, like, oh, okay, this is a human being needs to eat lunch at some point and needs to get that glass of water or go pee or, whatever those things you got to do. So that's, I guess, that moment where I couldn't pour myself that glass of refreshing, cool Brita water was my moment to make a little change.
Yeah, there's so many things that I'm thinking about as you're sharing that and that are coming up for me. And one of them is just this idea that I feel as though so many of us have like kind of been groomed or conditioned, or like this is just the way we were brought up, to think that like if we're not doing something, then we're like wasting time. And so it's like, if you put, 15-minute blocks in your calendar and it's like you just sit there and did nothing for 15 minutes, it's like that's wasteful. That's not being productive. That's not pushing the needle. Yet, if we actually think about it, the fact that we don't take breaks or we think that breaks aren't productive is such a misnomer, because rest is part of high performance. Meals, having time to reflect, to just kind of land, center yourself, jump back into what you're doing. That's actually how we can actually prevent burnout and illnesses. Yet we think of it as like wasted time. Another thing that I'm thinking about too is the fact that so often I think this busyness, first of all, it's like we kind of like get addicted to it, that it's like we feel like we're on our A game if we're like just on that edge all the time. And that's when we feel like we're super productive and we're doing our best work. And it might be true. And also, I think that there's this deeper piece where so many of us are in these like really vulnerable places of feeling that we have to earn our worth by being busy. And, it just, again, just how we use time. And even, for example, I asked somebody recently and I said, what did you do yesterday? And they said, I did nothing yesterday. And they were in now this whole narrative about how they wasted their time and whatever. And I'm sure, people can relate to that. And I was holding space to think, when did recovery, decompression, reflecting, downtime, when did that become nothing? Like to me, because that's everything, because that makes me present to be able to show up in my life in a meaningful way. So when people think of rest, and anyway, those are lots of these swirly thoughts, Peter, that I'm thinking about when it comes to our time and how we use it and what's considered useful and waste.
I love that. I just love the way that you said, like, when did rest, recovery, when did that become nothing? And where that sent me is I've been reflecting a lot about this idea that we all sort of have at least two existences, right? There's the existence of us out in the world doing things like our jobs and these things that are generating money or whatever that might be. These things that are tied to our identity. And there's this other part of ourselves, which is just our beings and those, like, you hanging out with your kids or going for a walk or watching a sunrise or just like whatever that might, just the moment of like lying in bed, or that moment when you first wake up in the morning, these moments of just life and of existence. And like one of the things that we teach when I do the mentoring work in the summer is this idea of personal value, and that like every human being has infinite personal value just by virtue of
existing, being.
Like just you don't have to earn that, you just have that. But I feel, and I really feel this in my own life, this true erosion of the value of the part of me that is not out there doing things. And yet there's so much about that part, that sort of interconnectedness that really is like, that's what makes life worth living. That's what makes you feel that sense of, oh, it's nice to be alive. It's nice to be a human. It's nice to have connection. And so I appreciate that challenge that you're putting forward.
Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you, Peter. And what I'm thinking about hearing you talk about that and how that's landing with you is this idea that I recall one time, and it was early in the morning, and I was at my desk, and a supervisor happened to walk by, and they said, "Oh, how's your morning?" And I said, "Do you know what? This morning I actually woke up and I felt pretty rested, and I took the dogs for a walk, and it was just like the most beautiful first snow. It felt lovely. I came back and I actually like tried this new recipe, and I actually made myself a smoothie bowl. I had a great cup of coffee, and I really came into work just feeling really present and ready, and my morning is just really going smoothly." Now, I appreciate that's probably more information that they were looking for with the "how are you?" And I literally was just like, I actually want to share this because it was really substantive. And there was this pause. And the supervisor said, "Clearly you're not working hard enough."
Oh my goodness.
And I remember that moment being like, wow, this is real. Like, this is actually what happens when you like try to show up present and grounded. And it's like, I felt like I was saying, I am an optimal employee today. Like, I am literally, you are getting the best version of Robyne that you are going to get. And it's probably been a wee while since I've actually felt this ready to do the work. And it was just so interesting because in our culture, I feel like, if we tell people, well, I'm rested, I'm settled, it's like, okay, that seems weird, but it's totally okay to say I'm busy, I'm overwhelmed, I'm burned out, I'm run off my feet, and I'm sustaining life on croutons as a food group. And everybody's like, oh, I feel you, right? We're friends. But if you're just like, no, I'm going to show up in a different way, I don't know if people really know what to do with us. Well, I'm well aware people rarely know what to do with me, but I mean, just in general, how are we meeting people who are in that place where they're making time for themselves without it being considered like self-indulgent? Because that's really actually self-stewardship, and that's going to make me better for you as my boss or my employer or my family or my friends or my community.
And I feel like employers are waking up to this. Like,
Yes.
I think there's a giant lag as far as the culture shifting and our own sheepishness. Like, I certainly experience sheepishness around self-care, which is crazy because I encourage people to take it when I'm on stage. And I'm going to be doing some facilitation and work for like a large hospital, and they're like, we just want people to take care of themselves because we're now seeing, the world pushed us over the edge of that capacity that now people truly cannot function anymore. And so the productivity's gone down, like all those kind of metrics that kind of forcing your way through it seem to be the answer to that. Are they realizing like, oh no, there's something else that's required. So I'm like cautiously optimistic that there's more awareness and willingness for that. But I agree that we certainly have a long way to go.
Yes.
I'm curious, Robyne, like for somebody who's in a situation where they don't feel supported in that way, or they don't feel safe, or they don't feel like their self-care is valued. Like what could we offer them?
Oh. So my first response on that is actually like challenging what we think self-care is. Because I think so often like self-care is like, okay, I've depleted myself so much. Now I have to try and like build myself back up again, maybe. And usually we wait till we're sick or there's a crisis or something where we kind of get forced to start to look after ourselves. Like, I think that's something that I see often in the groups that I support. What I like to challenge people about is like the responsibility of self-stewardship, that you are entrusted with this body. You are entrusted with this purpose, with this job that only you can do. Because I wholeheartedly believe we all have like a purpose. And I also think in our lifespan, we have multiple purposes and multiple seasons of what the world needs of us. And self-stewardship means that I am making sure that I am going to so be ready for when the world and when we're called to respond, we're called to do, when we're called to serve, that I'm going to keep myself so ready that I don't have to try and like get ready when the opportunity comes. Like I'm already going to be ready. And I think about that in terms of like, if, you know, supporting a loved one, if I'm grounded and I have my needs met, that's going to make it so I'm more able to show compassion and empathy. So I think of it more of as like, it's not like, again, indulgent or like, oh, it'd be nice to at the end of the day. No, this is like, we're supposed to ensure, like I think as a collective of weary hearts and souls, we're supposed to look after ourselves because that increases the likelihood that we're going to take care of one another. So I like to think about it as that stewardship piece.
I love that. I couldn't help but think of, like in my career as an artist, one of the greatest kind of pieces of knowledge that I got early on was I remain a huge fan of Glenn Hansard, just brilliant artist. And I remember him saying, he said, you know, you spend so much of your life knocking on the door of the world and you say, hey world, like pay attention, pay attention, pay attention. And at some point, if you're lucky, the world turns around and looks at you and says, what? And in that moment, you want to be ready with this, like, yes. This is the thing. So I obviously we're talking about sort of, I'm talking about like developing a skill or a talent, yeah. and basically, but the idea, the lesson for me there was that every day I'm preparing myself. And so I'm not actually thinking about, some kind of giant, large outcome or whatever. It's just like, and I'm also not, I don't feel like I'm kind of failing at it every day because I'm not there. It's like my number one task is just this readiness. And so I love, even though I've sort of applied it in my life to sort of career readiness or skill set as an artist readiness, I love the idea, and kind of circling back to where I mentioned that, like that other part of our life, like our readiness to be available for the people that we love and care for, our readiness to have that body that we live a happy life in because we're not trapped in a body because we've taken care of it and we've nurtured it. Yeah. So I appreciate that. I
love it. And the practical part of my brain loves all of this conversation. And then it says, this is lovely. How do we do it? Like, what does that actually look like? So in terms of to like do a circle back to the question about what does that actually look like? I encourage people to like think about matching the desired feeling that you're hoping to achieve with your self-care with the behavior that's actually going to get you there. So I'll give you an example, Peter, just to try and kind of flesh this out just so folks can follow along, I hope. It's this idea, like I see some people say like, oh my gosh, I'm like so tired and depleted, like I need rest. And then they curl up at the end of the day and they watch like murder documentaries. They watch true crime shows and they're like, having their snacks, watching the biographies of serial killers. And they're like, Robyne, I just don't feel like I'm really rested. It's like our poor little nervous system, right? We battle it and bruise it all day trying to manage our lives, and we curl up with like violence to try and like get rest. And so I know that seems like kind of like a, are you kidding me example, but Peter, the amount of people, for example, like when the last, serial killer documentary came out and somebody's like, oh my gosh, Robyne, have you watched it? No, because like there is very little that I can actually control that goes on in my life, Peter. But one thing I can control is like what I take in, like in terms of my, like how I'm choosing to recover. So my invitation again is to think about what is it that I want to feel. If I want to feel rested, then maybe that is sleep. Maybe it's a nap, right? Like maybe it's just like opening up some spaciousness in my day, or even simplifying my day so it doesn't take as much energy to kind of pull everything off or make it all happen. If I want to feel like energized and I want to have like got lots of good energy going on through my body, then I'm going to move, right? I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to exercise. I'm going to do like vigorous activity because that's going to give me that desired outcome. So again, what I often see is people saying, I want to feel this, but if you actually pause and look at their behavior, notice if that behavior is actually welcoming that feeling or is it just going after something else?
I love that. I'm sure you're familiar with the book. I mean, millions of people are. Atomic Habits by James
Clear. Yeah, badass. Yeah, so good.
But he talks about like this identity, like being like beyond the habit and the systems is like this of really embodying the kind of person that like I am a musician, and therefore I do the habits and the things, like I play guitar, or like I am at peace, or I am calm, or I am connected. I'm probably not maybe watching murder documentaries.
And there's no judgment. There's no judgment for those who are.
Yeah. No judgment. No, I mean, I'm with you. Tess, my partner, who you know.
Yes.
We struggle. We almost never watch TV or Netflix or whatever. And when we do, it's a rare thing to find something. Because she insists, like she would never go near any of like she wants things that help her feel good about the world. And I guess like most of the kind of clickbait on our social media feeds is they're playing to the part of us that wants to be reactive and wants to be have our adrenaline pumping or those kind of things. So it's a rare thing to find something that ticks those boxes.
Mm-hmm. And a really powerful takeaway, again, to apply what you just shared about that kind of identity piece, is essentially you become whatever you say after I am. So if you say I am a musician, then obviously you're going to do habits that reinforce that. If you say like I'm stressed, I'm overwhelmed, I'm burned out, I'm angry, I'm agitated, your body's like, oh, okay, so let's make sure we get all those feelings and memories and those experiences that are going to help Robyne stay in that place of being stressed or being overwhelmed or being burned out. So again, it's not that it's this like toxic positivity, because I think that's another whole other thing. It's this idea of just really like channeling that idea of that present, like being present, where it's like, okay, right now, like I am the thinker, I'm not the thought, right? We can't control our thoughts, despite the whole field that things that we can. You can't decide what thought pops into your mind, but we can decide like how we respond to it. So I can give you an example, again, try to making it practical for folks. One of the challenges I'm doing right now is encouraging people to even just take one wellness window a day. Like even just, it could be a minute, it could be 15 minutes, but just actually carve out and protect a wellness window. So Peter, I went out on my channels with my community and I was like, okay, this is what we're going to do as a community. We're going to set some intention. We're going to do these wellness windows. So today's wellness window was a walk and wonder, right? Leave the phone behind, go outside and just walk and wonder. And Peter, I opened the door very early this morning with my two dogs, and it was like torrential rain. It was like cold and gloomy. And we live in a new community where we don't have like things that's like still a construction site. So it's muddy. Like, I mean, like paws up to their elbows, mud. And I had this moment where it was like, not today. Like wellness window, forget it, not today. But then I actually realized, no, what the power we can do to change our behavior and really work with our time is to notice the barrier, right? So instead of just being like, oh, it's raining, and then that thought's like, it's raining, dogs get muddy, you don't have time to clean up 8 muddy paws. Instead, I just said, okay, so I notice there's this barrier of it being bad weather, but I'm choosing to face this barrier and go through it because I wanted to stay accountable to my community. So just because we have a thought like, oh, I don't have time for it, it doesn't mean that's a directive to say, stop what you're doing. It's like, no, that's the barrier, and choose again. Choose where you get to go from here. And that's something that's within our control.
And I love that. I love also just the power of accountability that you're describing, and like how as humans, we really love gamification, and so the fact that you've said you're going to do something, there's other people that you in your mind you're accountable to, just the power of that. How did you feel afterwards? Like how do you feel now thinking back on the fact that you did do it anyways?
Thank you for asking that question. And I'll share with you, when I have to persist, when I have to like dig a little bit deeper or like try a little bit harder, the reward is always richer. The reward lasts longer. When I do things with ease, it's like, yeah, that felt good. I followed what I said and that was great. But when I'm able to like notice some adversity, or if like there's something standing in the way and I still find a way to like stay in line with my values, that always feels much, much better. So I definitely, it's not to suggest that like we always have to show up, because I think we also need to practice compassion, and some days you might not have it, and that's okay too. But I'll share with you, and this is actually going to lead, because I'm mindful of our time, and I actually want to make sure we get to our questions. So I want to ask you this question, if it's okay. All right, are you ready for a question? I'm sorry, I didn't ask you if you wanted to ask me first, but there you go. If you have like 5 extra minutes, Peter, and your busyness of moving through space and time, all the things that Peter does, if you have 5 minutes, what's one of your favorite activities to do in that 5 minutes? If you find a free 5 minutes.
I walk out my front door. I've done this many times. I walk out my front door. I have to cross the street because my building has some height to it. But when I cross the street, like for most of the day, there's sun. And I'll stand on the sidewalk and I'll let sun hit my face. And my neighbors probably all think I'm crazy, because often I'm in my like flip-flops or whatever. Especially over the last couple of years, where I was just doing so many virtual performances and stuff. And I have these really tight windows. I just go outside, sun on my face, and fresh air. Amazing what that can do.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I love that.
What about you? What's your 5 minutes?
Yeah. So if I have 5 minutes, and it was funny, I remember, so when I started doing practices of yoga, and I don't do it consistently enough to feel like I'm competent to talk about yoga, but I always remember that last few minutes, which was like the Shavasana, where it's like dead corpse pose, where you like lay there. I always used to think that was like the biggest waste of time, right? Like I literally was just like, oh, I got to get going. And I remember one time I was doing this yoga class with this remarkable instructor, and for whatever reason, it was just the moment, Peter, where it was just like, today, Robyne is actually going to understand and experience Shavasana. And literally in that little window, I like had this like full experience where I like think I might have fallen asleep. I woke up. I kind of like was just wandering kind of around through my thoughts and my feelings in a non-judgmental way. And I remember when we were invited to like, end the practice, I remember feeling as though that it was like this like time machine, right? Like I couldn't believe how much things that I had just felt and not felt, and how quiet my mind had gotten for this like 5 minute window. So now sometimes, especially in between these virtual talks and meetings that I'm going bang, bang, bang behind, I love to literally just like enact Shavasana without actually having to do the yoga practice first, right? So if I can just like lie flat, right? Literally like just like lie flat. And I can share with you, I've noticed when I'm traveling all the time, I'm like very rarely like lying flat unless I'm going to sleep. And so there's just something amazing when we go to different levels in our physical space, like getting really tall or getting flat. So I try to change whatever level, Peter, I've been in the most. So if I've been sitting, I try to stand or I lie on the floor. If I've been standing, I try to lie on the floor. Like I try to like change the level. And I do that in those 5 minute windows, and I find it remarkably restorative, which sounds kind of odd, but it works for me.
I love that. I do not have any resistance to the Shavasana part of the yoga class. I love the Shavasana part of the yoga class.
Good for you.
I did have a question for you. I had so many things I want to say, Rob. We always run out of time, which is, I think this bodes well for for our podcast here.
Agreed.
Should we leave it there, seeing as we both asked each other a question, and I'll save my question for next time?
I would welcome you to ask my question. I'll try and answer it briefly. I'm curious, what was your question?
Well, my question was, given the modality that I'm in right now, I just wanted to know, like, what was your favorite road trip ever?
Oh my gosh. My favorite road trip ever. Wow. I struggle with like ranking things the bestest ever.
Or
one
just
road
trip that you loved.
This is a fun road trip. I remember this one vividly. This was actually one of the first road trips I remember. I remember my sibling and I were coming back from a hockey tournament. My brother was very into hockey. And I remember it was like, this was literally like the first time, Peter, that mini sticks, they were like in our world. Okay. So I remember my brother and I both got mini sticks, and we were sitting in the back seat, and maybe we were like playing, we were like just interacting with these mini sticks. And then I remember my father multiple times saying like, okay, friends, like I'm driving on a highway, like just keep it down there. Like try and keep your play contained to the back seat. And we're like, yeah, we're doing a good job. We're doing a good job. So I remember like, again, I can't even imagine what this was like for my father, but hurling down a very, very busy highway. And I decided my brother had kind of hit my knuckles a few times with these like sword, like we were using these mini sticks as swords. And I remember like, he was like, I felt like I was being like kind of antagonized. And so I got really frustrated, and it was me, and I have very little impulse control. So I literally two-handed my mini stick, and I went to haul off and hit my brother's mini stick, not him, the mini stick, right? As he pulled his mini stick away, so it hit my father in the back of the head. And I remember there was like a little bit of brake action, and then it was like stone cold silence. And I went through like every spectrum of emotion in that car with no words being spoken. And it was just like, I just remember being like, oh, okay. Yeah. And I just remember like, and now there's some moments where I see like kids running around with mini sticks. That was the last time my hands have ever physically touched a mini stick, because I was like, never again. I can't be trusted with a mini stick. So I know that wasn't my most memorable, but it is one that I do have moments, especially when I'm driving, just thinking like, gosh, what we've put our parents through. It's quite remarkable tales that we could tell.
It's one of those things that's like really bad in the moment, but makes for a good story afterwards.
I think it makes for a good story. And just to hold space for my father's emotional regulation, right? That like, it's one of those things where clearly he took that if you have something not nice to say, then don't say anything. And so he just locked that in, and we got home safely. So Dad's pretty amazing like that.
I actually found all my own old mini sticks, and I gave them to my little nephew. I said, I think you can sell these, and you can keep all the money. So that just happened recently. I was cleaning out things at my mom's house.
So good.
If you see some mini sticks from a little boy named Charlie, give him a good price, all right?
It's time to build entrepreneurship. Never too early.
Exactly. Well, Robyne, this has been thoroughly enjoyable. My car looks a bit like a sauna. I've fogged up the windows here. And I was so nervous that like someone was going to, because this looks very suspicious, but nobody has knocked on my window. So this has been a true pleasure. And any final thoughts before we let the people go?
As always, thank you, Peter, for making time for this conversation, and to everybody who's listening, thank you for making time for Peter and I today. And don't be shy. Reach out. Put in your comments. Let us know what you want to hear more about. We are so here to listen, to hold space for you. And this is the right time to ask the questions. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, and my final thought is, as much as you've heard Robyne and I advocating for this 80%, I just want to underline that this podcast, right? We're squeezing this in, but I'll speak for myself, but I'm assuming you feel the same way, Robyne, that this time that we're taking right now, I would say this is restorative for me. This actually is increasing my capacity getting to spend this time with you. So, thank you for helping me fill my time meaningfully today.
Thank you, Peter. Take good care.
Take good care.